Peace YouTube, this is Fleur Broom coming to you today with a new topic of discussion. Check on it. I think it's live. Is it live? Okay. I think it's live. Can you guys see me? Okay. I think you can see me. Hey, Shay. All right. Check on it. Hey, Jay Wayne. Hey, Beer Cat. Meow. Hey, Brooklyn Lady. Hey, Betty. All right, so I'll wait until a few more of you check on in. I think it's saying there's nobody here. Is it? Oh, wow. Yo, they're on my feet already. Okay. Check on in. As you know, I usually wait until it's about 500 to start so people actually can hear a bit, get the gist of the conversation. So this topic is, inspired by a couple things, especially after the interference on the last live I did, where you heard the Agent Smith on my feed. You know what? I'm so grateful that you heard him because this is a testimony of what I deal with. You know what I mean? And he got busted, so he's probably fired. What a very poor, like you even got busted. Everybody heard you. Like, do you not realize that, you martyr me when you get busted on my feed? It's crazy. So there was an Agent Smith on the last video. If you didn't get a chance, you'll hear him at the 140.54 mark on my last video. They messed with my feed because I was talking about the gray. So they inspired me to make this video along with Timothy Arborino. So Timothy Arborino made a video earlier and I had a chance to watch, so I'm going to discuss it. And it's so wonderful to hear things that sometimes it's like the pieces of the puzzle come together easier when you have others who are involved in intel. Like they may not know what I know. So I'm so grateful I heard his video early this rising. So it was the inspiration of the Agent Smith, the Dark Kabbalist that was on my feed. You inspired me to talk about the invasive terrestrials, the insectilian governmental greys, the Malachian agents. You know what I mean? We'll talk about that. So I'll wait until everyone checks in. I do have my notes. I think you prefer when I stay kind of like with a wonderful way of conveying things with keeping on track. So you were watching Timothy's video today? Oh, snap. Go ahead. Yeah, so I'm going to touch on him. And what's interesting about that is I can add to this. I just wrote a message on Timothy's feed, and it's just this. Listen, I come, and many of you know, hey, Quantum Sensei. Hi, Mama. Beautiful one. It's kind of like I have and I don't want to be gentle because I haven't ever been gentle with you. And I want to, hey, shalom, Ayafi. I want to try to be I don't want to be careful. Let me stop that. I want to keep it real. I always feel a certain way when, especially my family, many of you know my family history, blood lineage. I am over 65% pure Carib with a dash of Taino with other genealogy, which I don't necessarily have to show you or tell you because it doesn't really matter. What I'm majority of is what usually takes consensus rather than the $5 Indians, which have 0.0 indigenous blood. But I speak on this also as an indigenous woman to the Americas, an Amero Indigeno. Okay, so for some of you who are unaware, there are people like myself who exist in the Americas, in North America, in parts of Canada, and also in Central and South America. My people were in Central America, South America, and the Caribbean, and also in the Americas, Northern Americas as well. I speak on this because I feel a certain way when I watch videos, and I love listen, I love an investigator who goes out into the field and actually verifies stuff. This isn't in any way to give any strife to Timothy for his work on talking about the Paladro de Cara. Is it Paladro, 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 Paladoro, Paladoro de Cara, face peelers, okay? I'm gonna wait to really get into the topic until we get to 500, but I just feel a certain way about villages allowing Europeans, like people from the America, like Americans that are lunar, that they just easily allow them to come into their villages to, you know, discuss whatever, and they worship them. And why that bothers me is because that's why all of the nations have been infiltrated by having this level of trust. Now, I know Timothy didn't mean harm, nor did his homeboy. They went out there and did an investigation, which their government didn't even do. So, and also the government, I'll talk about that later. But, you know, there isn't any shade to him, but it just shows why these types of indigenous communities get infiltrated. You know, I always talk to why my people, you know, my indigenous communities have been infiltrated and have been genocided by that kind of trust. You just don't let anybody come in your community. I don't care if he says he's a journalist. I mean, he's a YouTube journalist, for God's sake. And maybe they verified it, but I doubt it. And they gave him a ceremony, which I felt was like, why? Because he's a European? Because he's got light skin? There's this worshiping of lighter skin that has left people victimized by other, there are a lot of the colonizers, most of the colonizers come with fair skin. And the fact that you just let him come in, and I'll talk about that later, because a young girl who was a survivor of the face peeling, she was scared of him because the being that was in the suit had the same sound and look, you know, height as him. So I just think, you know, it's no shade. Let me explain something, y'all. It isn't shade to Eurocentric people, but you have to realize, as an indigenous woman coming from South America, one of the reasons why our communities were infiltrated is because of that trust. And trust is a good thing, but when you get people who have nefarious intentions, and listen, y'all, let's keep it real. Don't get offended if you come with a lighter shade skin. You have to realize that most 90% of the colonizers are Eurocentric. You must know that, okay? So please use facts as your reasoning rather than getting offended. Like, you aren't going to see a whole bunch of indigenous women colonizing places, killing off people, raping the women, and taking on the culture, you know, basically scavenging through the culture and vulturing and acting like it's ours. That isn't something that indigenous women do. So please refrain from typing up epilogues of stories like, oh my God, you're right. If I'm racist, then talk to the people who are colonizing all of the planet. So talk to them. Why are you talking to me? You won't see any of my ancestors walking around looking like me colonizing places. So stop it. I'm speaking specifically about that. Timothy didn't do that. In zero way do I say Timothy did that. Not at all. His work was phenomenal. I just said, I just dislike the fact that indigenous groups in these rural areas trust lunar people. They think that they're there to save them. And that's what makes them vulnerable to these type of things we're going to talk about. Okay. So that's all I'm talking about. You know, if you know a group of so-called darker Aboriginal people that have colonized all these areas, North America, Europe, and so on, you share that with me. But as far as historically in this hologram, all I've seen is a certain visual look, a criteria that is allowing people to go into certain areas and have access to very pure bloodlines and makes them more susceptible for forms of genocide, okay, as we see all over. So that's all I'm saying. Okay, so put a like on the video because people get offended. I'm like, you don't get offended when people colonize. Like, like you get offended when you see things happening in other arenas. You don't say anything. You only say it when a face looks different than yours who speak on something that you're doing. Listen, I speak on brownness, indigenous, doing things all the time. So I'm an equal opportunist all the way across the board. I speak about people who look like me who do some really savage things. So if you get offended, that's on you. That has nothing to do with me. Okay? Because this is something that we need to speak about. And again, This isn't shade to Timothy, who did a phenomenal job going into Peru to get this information and to verify it. So I just say this, it bothered me, and it should, as an indigenous woman, seeing a European man once again having access to a very remote indigenous group in the jungle. Remember, that's my neck of the woods. That's, most of you are not even from there. So it's like, I wouldn't, you know, I come from places like that. I'm a jungle chick. I told you my family comes from South America originally. I'm a Carib. So I can speak on it because those are my people. Those are around where my people lived. You know, when we have our people living in remote areas in the jungle and people come in from foreigners come in, you aren't seeing dark-skinned people coming in and doing those interviews and then being worshipped when we go in and getting ceremonies done on their behalf, and they haven't done anything to get a ceremony. That's all I'm saying. So anyway, put a handy dandy like on the video if you're for the shenanigans. I'm waiting until 500. We're gonna start the conversation, and this is dedicated to the Agent Smith who was caught on my video, slipping. Time, keep on. You slipped. He slipped on the banana peel. He got busted. We heard your voice, and you're probably fired from the governmental agency that hired you to be all on my feed, all in my cookies. Okay? Okay? Unlike the fake UFO community who you contract to tell lies and misnomers and to mislead people, I keep it 1000%. And remember, in body and spirit, I'm stronger than anything you have to do. Okay? So you better watch yourself. You better check yourself before you wreck yourself. Okay? All right? You got busted, slipping. Time keeps on slipping into the future. Okay, so when we get to 500, we'll start the conversation, okay? Let me give a PSA, because I think I have to do this because we have newer people to me. And, you know, it's I don't know why you come to my channel if you really don't like myself or people like me. So let me give a, what is it, personal service announcement? Yeah, PSA. Okay, if you have a problem with people who talk about aliens or governmental grays, this video isn't for you. If you're offended by people, women of color with big breasts, who are natural, who haven't taken the Kukarachi kill shot, this probably isn't for you. If you aren't in alignment with someone who is deciding to speak without any form of altering technology on her phone or her computer, or decides that editing isn't something she wants to do, this probably isn't for you. If you think that people who aren't a size 2, 3, 4, 5, even I used to be size 10, aren't really able to speak on things because they need to lose some weight, this probably isn't for you. If in fact women of color are people that you feel are sub-tier human, that's conjecture. And having the verification to speak on anything other than basketball or twerking, this video may not be for you. Okay, we hit the 500 mark. Let's get it in. All right, so we're going to talk about the invasive terrestrials, the insectilian governmental greys, the Malachian agents that are infiltrating. So this is going to be very sensitive. I'm going to talk about many different groups. Let me explain something before we go further. I'm going to talk about people who are melanated. I'm going to talk about people who are Muslim. Not Muslim, Arabs, or people living in Palestine and Israel and North America and Central America. Who else am I going to kick it to? Africans, Arabs. I'm talking about everybody. So everybody's getting it today. Northern Europeans. So I'm an equal opportunist. Okay. So if you feel subjected or sensitive or gaslit by any of that, this video might be something that you may want to go to another channel and watch them twerk or talk lies or just do editing, making sure they get out anything that's offensive. I generally offend if people are offended. Okay. Can everybody hear me? Can everybody hear me? Just put a 13 if you can hear me. I'm going to start off the conversation. Someone said they can't hear me. Uh-oh. Did they stop it already? Okay. All right, let's get it in. So we're going to talk about Timothy Alberta, and I want to give him the credit because with his information, again, I was incentivized to do this video based on the, if you want to listen to my last video, go to the 1 minute 40 mark. No. What is it, 140.54 mark in my video, and you'll hear an Agent Smith on my video as they attempted to disrupt my video feed and also stop my share about the Greys. So thank you for incentivizing me. And then, of course, Timothy made an amazing video today. He actually traveled, and I'm going to talk about this. They're called the pedicados, which are face peelers. We talked about them before in Peru. They have a phenomenon happening in Peru, over in San Antonio, Nauta, Peru, where people are experiencing, these entities that are peeling off the face of young people, generally young adults, as young as like maybe 15, 14, and then a little bit like maybe in the early 20s. Okay, so they're experiencing this. So the Peruvian government is deciding to, oddly enough, ignore it, as I'll talk about what my opinion is about that. They're experiencing this. Timothy, my mother used to say that means truth. Timothy, I think he's phenomenal. I think him going into Peru rather than listening to the intel, I love the fact that he wanted to go, and he had lived also in Peru. So I think, for him, it was probably easier for him to go in knowing Spanish and going into the community and being able to investigate further. So if you watch his video, he goes very detailed into this. I took notes based on his video and my own opinion about his video and his share and what I know about the so-called terrestrials, the invasive terrestrials that are being governmentally instituted. Some of you like to call them the Greys, okay? So he went into Peru. He did his investigation. We're talking about the perocaro, which are face peelers. And this is something, and I want to explain to everyone, this is something for years that has happened in the jungle. Also in Brazil, I'm not sure if Colombia has it. Colombia may, I'm not sure. I know in Brazil, Venezuela, it is something that does occasionally happen in the jungle area. You don't hear too much about it because it's usually censored, and usually those remote areas aren't able to get that news out to the public. So generally you may not hear that. You may not hear about this phenomenon that's happening where people are being abducted and their face is being, the skin off their face is being removed. Now, I want to reference a couple things before I actually go into this, or maybe because I want to make sure I remember. If you remember that there was a scene in with Kathy Bates in it was in American Horror. Do you guys remember American Horror with the Coven? I think it's called The Coven, American Horror, where you had Kathy Bates, who was living in like the 17th century, and she had slaves down underneath the ground that she was using their blood and their skin to revive herself. I think you remember the scene when Kathy Bates was underneath the ground, like she had her slaves like tied up on on shackles, and she was using their blood as her beauty regimen. And I want to remind everyone, if you get very sensitive to this and gaslit, this isn't something you should listen to. And also, I want to give an FYI to moms, abuelas. If you have your little ones in the room, please, this conversation isn't appropriate for little ones, okay? Because I want to make sure I'm sensitive to little ones doing the listening to this. So please put your earbuds on. Just make sure the little ones, because this isn't a, I want to be gentle with this conversation. So in that movie, and they talk about this. Now, I think many of you don't realize, and I think the only people who may not know this are those who haven't been privy to it because they may have not been victim or victimized, or it isn't from their community. So I want to put this on the forefront before we start going into the face peelers that are going on in Brazil and Peru, and it's also happening in Brazil and also in Venezuela. I just want to put that out there, and also in parts of French Guiana, Cayenne. Okay, it's very remote. Again, it's in remote villages where people don't have the ability to protect themselves. Very rudimentary kind of protection, meaning they don't have really high tech devices to help them, like artillery that would be able to be a good defense against these terrestrial beings. Okay, so just to let you know that oh god, I hate when I go off. There is, I think I spoke about this years ago. When I first moved to Orlando, I'm not living in Orlando anymore, but when I first moved to Orlando, many of you know, I moved there in like 2011 with my little ones, and I was invited to a meeting, which was great. New Yorkers that were up in up in not Daytona, not Daytona, Tampa, Florida. I was invited by Professor Griff, David Banner was there. What's her name was there? A couple people were there. It was the Pan-African group was meeting up to talk about what happened to Trayvon Martin. I hadn't any clue of what was going on. I just moved to Florida at the time. I had little ones. Many of you know when you go through birth and you give birth to children, especially when they're little, you're kind of like in a mommy zone, so you don't pay attention. So I had a chance to come up to Florida and go to this meeting, this Pan-African meeting. They were discussing what was going on with Trayvon Martin, but it was really nice. It was the 5 percenters were there. Those are the 5 percenters that represent the Muslim community, Islam. The Nation of Islam was represented. Also, the Pan-Africans were there. Professor Jeff was there, and that was the first time I went to one of these groups, because remember, I'm from New York originally. Even though I lived in Florida, I tend to go to a lot of the meetings that were in Harlem. You know, big up to all my New Yorkers in the house. So it's a little different. So I went to the meeting, and that was the first time that I ever heard that they were doing harvesting of organs. That's when the first time I realized that Trayvon Martin's relative was there. And he discussed the fact that his body, Trayvon Martin's body, was found with 0 organs in his body, and it was stuffed with newspaper. Okay, this wasn't something that was ever publicized on the news. It wasn't talked about. Nobody ever spoke about it. And I was in shock that this was something that happened, that this man wasn't just, Zimmerman didn't just shoot a random guy. He basically probably got paid, allegedly, for getting the organs of this brown man, that young man that was found. And they talked about it as if the security guard mistaken him. But now, after that time, I realized that there were a lot of officials, civil servants that were being contracted to kill, to murder brown youth, especially brown males of a certain age, between a certain age. And they were getting a lots of money for their organs, their spleen, their heart, especially the heart. The heart was a lot more money. And that's why also when you go into the hospital, young brown girls who go into the hospital without any sort of support, a lot of times may not leave with their babies, or if the baby transitions before they leave the hospital, the first thing they want to do is harvest the organs, okay? So this isn't conjecture, y'all. I know many of my lunar family may not know this. So I'm alerting you to something that's a fact. This isn't anything that's false. Brown youth are being used as for organ harvesting, okay? That is just what it is. And it's been always and has been since what you perceive as slavery, okay? They were doing this back then as well. Okay, so I just want to put that there because I think, and we have to, and brown, my melanated people in here, please just be patient, because what we know isn't something that others know, because it isn't something that affects them in the same way. So try to refrain from saying nasty things in the comment, because our lunar family can only know what they're exposed to. And if it isn't generated on the news, they're not living in brown communities. It isn't something that they know. Okay, so unless they're the ones harvesting. So I'm just putting that out there. So be respectful in the group, because we're alerting others in other communities of something that may not be something they're privy to based on proximity. Okay, just put that there, y'all. Okay, so everybody be respectful to each other, because I got to talk to my brown people in here, my melanated people, is that you tend to, I know you're very sensitive and you get very upset about it, as we should, but we can't blame people who are unaware of that, because they aren't the ones doing it. Okay, so just let's keep that in there. So for those who don't know, organ harvesting has been on the rise. Now, because we're going to reset, and Dr. Delbert Blair, big up to Dr. Delbert Blair. Many of you know I was under the tutelage of Dr. Delbert Blair. He talked about beings that were eating and harvesting humans on the earth. Now, we talked about this years ago. I'm going to go into the topic, but I got to build a little bit. So be patient with me, y'all. Dr. Delbert Blair talked about the harvesting going on, harvesting of everyone, lunars, children, generally young people. We talk about, many of you talk about the whole adrenochrome, and you think that that's where it begins and ends. It doesn't. Adrenochrome is just one commodity of a multitude of harvesting organs that, harvesting chemicals and organs that they utilize. Okay. So I think I talked about this years ago. Some of you are newer to my channel. I talked about the fact that they had, I gotta look at my baby, y'all. She's outside behaving herself. Hold on. Okay. I talked about years ago, there was a ship that used to come. Now, when I say ship, now I'm realizing it probably wasn't a ship from above. It was probably a ship from below. And it came every 5 years. And what it generally did is it came every 5 years to go grocery shopping. And what do I mean by that? It came every 5 years, and you would find a whole bunch of people missing around this time, like a heightened, like it was spiked with missing people because they went grocery shopping. They were using people's bodies as a food source. Okay, so every 5 years it was particular extraterrestrials, that's allegedly, that would come around every 5 years to do their grocery shopping. So all of your Willy Wonka systems all set everybody up. They make these contracts with these beings and they come over here, like Jeepers Creepers, right? Yeah, they come in and they just basically take and harvest, and your Willy Wonkas allow a certain group, they allow a certain amount to be harvested or taken for food source, okay, like cattle. Okay, you can be disgusted by it, you can be upset, but it's what I know. Okay, so Dr. Deborah Blair always talked about the fact that these beings, a lot of different beings coming here, were harvesting, people, human form. Now, even with you understanding that this is a holodeck, we do have body suits, biosuits, okay? So they have a genetic disposition. And just like you eat cow or you eat turkey, there are beings that are higher on the food chain that eat you, okay? They eat people, they eat human flesh. And we're gonna go in the fact that in Africa, and again, this is very sensitive, and I know I'm speaking about it so matter of fact because this is what I know and I've known for years, but I want to be careful and sensitive, because if you are sensitive to this topic or the things I'm speaking about, please, by all means, you should exit, because what you'll do is you'll get gaslit, you'll get upset, and then you'll write me an epilogue of like craziness on my channel. I'm not for everyone. That's why I don't advertise my channel. If you were recommended to come to me, just sit and listen. If it doesn't resonate with you, it's all good. I'm okay with listening to your opinion, but please, it's a lot of times I want to be mindful of your sensitivity, and I give you the forewarning to leave before it gets, something that messes with you psychologically. Okay, so we have these beings. Also, we're going to talk about, first I'm going to talk about what's going on in Peru, and I'm going to build, because I know certain things that Timothy probably doesn't, because I don't know if he's from my sector, even though he spoke about this. I don't really listen to Timothy, but he spoke about this, and I want to give him the credit, because I've gotten this from his visit to Peru. Okay, Timothy Alberino. Okay, please, I didn't take his content. I'm just commenting on it. And I always like to give credit where credit's due. Okay, he did a phenomenal job. He went into Peru to do the investigation of the paracaros, which are face peelers. Okay, so there was an event that was happening in Peru. I'm going to build upon this. I wanted to talk about the harvesting so you understand and understand that this is happening, and it's happening with your Willy Wonka systems. I wanted to build that with you, the narrative, because I want you to realize that what people perceive to be extraterrestrials are basically just contracted terrestrial grays. Okay, and these are beings wearing suits. Okay, so let's get into it. He actually went to investigate the Peruvian phenomenon that's happening with the face pillars, paracaro. When he went into the village, it's a very rural village. I know he was in San Antonio and Nauta, Peru, and the little villages within that, within that group. And he went to investigate. There was a young lady. There was one a live account, which I love that he did this, and he actually interviewed her. He didn't just talk about it, he be about it. He went and interviewed. The phenomenon that's going on in Peru is that this village was experiencing heightened amount of beings that were going out and hunting young adults, and basically peeling off their skin off their face. Okay. And this was happening for a while, and I feel so sorry, and I'm sorry for the villagers that were experiencing this. They were going out there and seeing people's the skeletal, the skeletons of people's faces with their skin peeled off. So Timothy went with his homeboy into the jungle in Peru. I love that he speaks Spanish, because everything gets lost in translation. When you speak another language, sometimes it's hard to get the conveyance of something interpreted unless you can basically speak to someone in their same native tongue. So he had a chance to interview the villagers there, and they all had the account that they were witnessing these type of beings that were hovering on some sort of hoverboard on their feet. Like, it looked like there were little circles on their feet. And even when they went into the jungle where these beings were, the feet of those beings had like indents of like circles on the ground. And they noticed that when they saw these beings, they were hovering up high. They had the ability, they were wearing some sort of technological suit. At the first imagery, there was a first image and it looked like a gray. That's why I'm bringing up the grays, y'all, because what you perceive as grays. And if you watch it, the imagery that you saw in whether it was real or not in Nevada, remember that aliens that were seen in Nevada, in North Las Vegas? Remember in the backyard, there was a family that saw these grays, these tall grays in their backyards. Remember that? The imagery of them looked like this being. When I saw it, I was like, oh my God, it looks very reminiscent. But the only difference is the being that we saw in the Las Vegas, I don't know if it had the long look. It almost looked like, the Goblin, the Goblin on like Super Friends, or what is he called, the Goblin? He's always on his hoverboard, the Goblin. What's his name? He always plays the Goblin, and he has this helmet that's kind of like elonged, like the Predator. No, not like the Predator, like the Alien. What's his name? The Goblin. He plays the Goblin, like how the Goblin has a hoverboard. Okay, it looks similar to that. Like the helmet looks similar to that. The Green Goblin. Thank you. The Green Goblin. Thank you, Dion. This being in this that the local said looks similar to the Green Goblin, as it had an outfit on. And the accounts are different, because initially when you saw an image that they captured on a bootleg phone, they don't really have high mount technology. The villagers in Peru, they took an image picture, and I found it very similar to what I saw in Las Vegas. Very similar in stature, very tall though, about 7 to 8 feet tall. Okay. But these beings look, from what the villagers say, they look like they're wearing a suit. And with the elonged head, the eye lens has like a yellow tinge to it, like a yellow lens on the eyes. Okay, so this so-called being, and I'm going to tell you why I think it's terrestrial rather than non-terrestrial, and it builds upon the fact that I was talking about the grays that are contracted by your Willy Wonkas. Okay, it had some sort of lens that was yellow and an extended helmet that was long back. The suit seemed kind of fitted on the person, and they had like these discs that were at the bottom of these boots. They were tall. The beings in these suits were tall, so they weren't short. And because everything is about perspective, remember, what is perceived as tall to a group of people, Peruvian, especially in these villages, are very short. They're very tiny people. I think generally, like 5'3", 5'5", they're very short people. So you have to be mindful, like someone like me who's closer to 5'9", my ideology of tall is going to be different than someone who's 5'2". Okay, so let's keep that in perspective. So they were witnessing these beings, and these beings seemed to be able to hover above the trees, over the trees, and they were seen to be jumping and hopping over people's houses, like with this propelled type of these discs that were kind of putting them up. And these beings in these suits had a superhuman kind of perception. Like they seemed like they had a lot of like their strong their agility. They had a great amount of agility, a great amount of strength. Like the way that they moved seemed like they were, extra. They perceive them, the villagers in Peru perceive them as supernatural, like having super strength. When I hear it as someone coming from the UFO community, I perceive it as maybe the suit that they were wearing had the ability to, enhance their physical movement or speed. okay? Because they're on some sort of advanced technology. Also, they were shooting them with like basic guns and shooting at these beings, these so-called, we'll call them the Paracaras. They were shooting these beings, these so-called extraterrestrials, which are terrestrials. I'm going to call them terrestrials. They were shooting these terrestrials. She's so naughty. She's eating my flowers. Shooting them at point blank range, and it wasn't even phasing them. One of the villagers also said they heard a ping, as if the suits had some sort of metallic reflective quality. So like almost like, you know, when you wear if anybody wore a bulletproof vest, I've worn one. My mate had worn one. So bulletproof vests can be a little heavy. It's kind of like the suits they were wearing had some sort of bulletproof expression, meaning that the bullets just bounced, but they were high technology. That wasn't something that we know that Willy Wonkas have. You know, those are not technology that we know. And do know that in this conversation, because this is technology that hasn't been something that we have, that has been known to us, doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Okay, a lot of times your Willy Wonka systems won't let you know what kind of technology they have created, reversed engineered from other beings that they come in contact with. They aren't telling you everything that they've been exposed to, like Iron Man. Thank you, and Black. Okay, so they were on these foot gliders, and the villagers who came in contact with them saw that when they saw them and were shooting at them, had flashlights, everything bounced off of them, and that they would shoot up in the sky. And also they had some sort of cloaking technology on these suits that when they went up in the trees, they kind of dissipated and disappeared. And we talked about a lot of the so-called extraterrestrials or beings that have reversed technology. That's not okay. Come here, come on. Biting things up. We're not biting on that. Okay. Okay. Yeah, she's eating all the flowers, right? She's a pup. They were able to cloak themselves in the sky. So a lot of the villagers who encountered these so-called terrestrials, these gray terrestrials, and I only call them gray because the first image we saw was of a gray being that looked similar to the being that we saw in Las Vegas. Okay, on first-hand accounts, the people said that they saw them with when they took a picture with grayish form, but then when people saw them visually in front of them, the suits appeared to be black and metallic. So no, you're gonna behave yourself. Come on. Nope, you're not going outside. Okay. They appeared to be black, visually black. So the suit in itself could change color spectrum based on how light is bouncing off of it. So I personally think the suit probably is black and metallic, but when a picture or light bounces off of it, you can perceive it as being gray. Okay. So the suit's kind of cloaked itself. So when these so-called beings, these Paracaras were, coming in and going up in the air, they would kind of disappear like before people's eyes, kind of cloak themselves. They had a cloaking system, and they would propel. Like there was very silent. It was kind of like a stealth. A lot of the Peruvians the villagers said they didn't hear anything. It was very stealth, like very quiet. The only time they would hear something it was when they would take off in the air, and it would have a propulsion sound, like an air compression sound, like that. Okay, like compressed air thrust, going in the eye and going in the air. The technology was more advanced than present day military. That was something that was talked about. What else? The footprints, when people would see this, villagers would see the footprints after an attack. The footprint would be like a circular disc-like. And also, there were times, anytime there was an attack on one of the village children, the young people, they would always travel in twos. So they wouldn't ever see these beings with just one of them. It would always be they travel in pairs. So these so-called grayish looking Paracaras would always travel in twos when they went to abduct and to go and attack one of the villagers, the young villagers. What else? They appear to be like 7 to 9 feet. We can't assume that the beings in the suit are tall. We can just say that the suits could in itself have it could just be basically be like a suit that's higher or taller than the beings inside. Now, what I love about him going there, big up to Timothy Alberino, what I appreciate about him, I love when somebody just doesn't listen to other people's accounts. I love when they go to the town. So he actually went there and he actually had a chance to interview the villagers and also interview the young lady. Her name was Talia. She was a survivor. That's why many of us know the story of what happened in Peru, because Talia was the survivor of one of the attacks by these Paracaras. Okay. She's 15 years old. Her name is Talia. And this is the account that Timothy actually had a chance to interview her. When she was attacked, she was going out around her house picking fruit from a tree, and it was at dusk time. Apparently, these attacks only happen at night. So these beings, these so-called beings on these hoverboards, they only come out at nighttime, which also lets me know that they aren't necessarily extraterrestrial. They're terrestrial because they're choosing to come out at night, because probably the suits. And that's why I was talking about the purple lights that all of us have outside. We're using the purple lights as a way to illuminate these beings, because even if they have these suits, the purple lights that I suggest everybody get in their backyards, you can actually see things with the purple lights that normally you wouldn't be able to see. Okay. So when he interviewed the young lady, Talia, she was picking fruits at dusk, meaning it was getting dark. So these beings actually came to attack her. When they did, they subdued her and it covered her mouth, so she wasn't able to scream. The first thing that they did is they had some sort of powder. She watched. This is her account, and I'm not giving it verbatim. You can also look at the interview that Timothy did with her, because I'm just giving you my what I remembered, and it's not going to be verbatim. Okay, just the gist of it. So when she was subdued, one being held her down. Now, what's interesting is this being had some sort of powder and a kind of paste, and he mixed the two in front of her where she could see it. Well, one of it's covering her mouth, and it put it in a nasal spritzer, a spray, and it attempted to put the nasal thing in her nose like this. What we found out later, and I'll talk about, is that nasal powder paste thing they put in her nose was meant to subdue her. It was like a chemical anesthetizer, maybe something that meant to put her to sleep or to make her not feel the pain. Okay. The beings then started to talk. Now, what I love about him doing the interview, big up to Timothy again, is that he was able to get her interview, because you weren't going to hear this. When she said is that she heard them talk, where all the other villagers never heard them speak. They never heard a sound. Even when they hit them with shots, they didn't hear the sound. So what they did is when she heard the sound, they talked. Now, that's what let me know who's doing this. One, she said the taller one sounded like a gringo speaking English. Now, anyone who speaks Espanol, you know that when you hear, especially from certain regions, even hearing a language that I know, you know the difference between a native speaking a language or someone who's a gringo, most likely a European or someone of European descent or American, that speaks English as a second or third tier language because of the way that the pronunciation. So the being that was talking was also talking to a second one that seemed a little shorter than the first one. So the first one there were two that subdued her. One was a little taller and one was perceived a little shorter. The taller one sounded like speaking Spanish as a gringo, and the shorter one spoke Spanish as if they spoke, like Peruvian Spanish, as if it was one of them. So the Spanish that one spoke and the one that the gringo spoke were Spanish, but the gringo spoke with an accent, knowing he wasn't Spaniard, okay? And he told the little one, the perceivably Peruvian one that was in the suit, don't get that on the face, because it's going to mess up the skin and make it harder for us it'll make the skin stick to the skull, stick to the bone. This is what she heard, y'all. Okay? This is crazy. So the taller one is talking to the smaller one, telling him not to get that powder stuff because they had to put this kind of stuff on her skin so that they could pull off her skin off of her face. Okay? So before, when she was subdued, it was talking, and she started, something happened, you got to watch the video, because I think, I don't know if she fell or they were trying to pull her somewhere and she fell down and she was able to scream. But before she was able to scream, they took like a laser and were attempting to take off her skin with the laser that burned her neck, so that they were able to pull the skin off of her face. So I'm assuming that the kind of paste that they put on her face kind of removed the skin or puffed it up enough to make it easier to pull the skin off when they were going to attempt to take the skin off of her face. Okay? She screamed. They must have dropped her, or they were trying to pull her somewhere to get her. Oh no, they attempted to pull her up on this hoverboard and she couldn't be pulled up. So they dropped down, and that's when it didn't have a chance that one of the beings could not take it off her, took the hand off of her mouth, and she was able to scream. And her brother was on the porch not too far away. Family members heard her. And then all of a sudden they took all their flashlights and were flashing, and they were trying to find her because they heard her scream. Then when they heard her scream, the taller gringo being, who had more of an accent that wasn't reminiscent of the locals, said, hey, the little one said in Spanish, we got to go. And the taller gringo one says, no, we can't leave her here. And they attempted to get her, but they couldn't. So they had to drop her, and they left. When they left, they saw them. She said she saw them just go up into the sky with these hoverboards, just get up and go on. Okay? So this was Talia, who gave the accounts. Again, I'm probably not giving her enough justice, or the interview. You can always watch it with Timothy. It's more information. It's just I just basically wrote everything down. Okay. So it seems like, y'all, this goes into why I was sharing with you yesterday that we have governmental grays. These are beings that are contracted, that are wearing suits. Now, I did a video years ago that YouTube, I'm not even sure, they probably took it down already, but I talked about the grays being either biosynthetic boards, or they are people wearing suits that are looking like grays, okay? That are wearing some sort of biotechnology, advanced technology, that they could have covenanted from another extraterrestrial group, and they've reverse engineered these suits to be able to do these things. And why this story is important, I can go into why particularly they're doing this. I do know for a fact, this is where Timothy couldn't draw this in, because he comes from a lunar background. Because lunars are not aware of this unless they're participating in this. A lot of them don't know that brown people with darker skin are being harvested for organs and for their skin. Now, I'm going to talk about something touchy that's happening over in Palestine and Israel, where that also happens there too. Okay? This has been happening for a long period of time, y'all. It isn't new. So maybe I love that he was able to get this information, but it definitely gives you validation that there's a reason why specific types of beings, the Malachians, which are the Zionists, who have been doing this for the longest time, harvest skins from people. And this also happens over in the Gaza Strip, over in Palestine, both sides, and in Israel, where they take the skins off of the dead people and they harvest it. Okay, this is happening all over. So it's happening in the United States. It's happening in, now we know, Central America. And now we definitely know from verification, happens in Israel and Palestine, where skin is being harvested and utilized. This is a fact. Now, why this interview was amazing is because he was able to talk to the villagers about what they were seeing. And this gives us a better bird's eye view of what some of us know already that he wouldn't know. The reason why these villagers, and the reason why they were being targeted, is because they live in a very remote area where they haven't they don't have tools or ways to protect themselves. So they're basically like wonderful specimens to be harvested, because they have kind of like a very remedial type of guns and weaponry. Okay, so Timothy did bring them some, as a way to get the interview. He did bring them some night goggles for heat sensitivity, and he brought them some high volume flashlights and some other things that he brought to them to the village so that they would be able to protect themselves and at least be able to see where these beings were doing these things to the young people whenever they would have an opportunity to get at them. Sitting ducks. Thank you, Capo. Okay. And this also, as Timothy said, he has basically said and verified that these aren't narcos. Most people think these are drug traffickers. These are not. These are not drug traffickers. Their technology is way more advanced than even the narcos. They're not trying to do something. The narcos are not utilizing these people or everything. So he kind of verified that they're not narcos and they're not miners, river miners. River miners are beings that go into the rivers and they mine like the resources, and sometimes they'll go and mess with the locals, especially along the jungle rivers over in the rainforest. They'll mess with the locals, like just to be able to, you know, extract the resources in those areas. So it isn't. He verified that they aren't river miners. Okay, and also the craft. That not only did he see the accounts of the villagers that were in Peru, and again, these people, the villages in San Antonio and Nalta, Peru. There's like little villages. He actually knows the names. I don't want to botch up the names because I can't pronounce them. They were over in those areas in Peru. The beings also saw that when these so-called invasive terrestrials, I'm going to call them invasive terrestrial grays, they would have these crafts that were see-through. Now, remember I told you about Wonder Woman? Remember Wonder Woman? Anybody who watched Wonder Woman back in the days? Remember Wonder Woman's spacecraft was invisible? Okay? It looked invisible. Every time they would see, like one of the beings had saw, one couple of the villagers had denoted that they saw these crafts in the sky and they were the shape of an acorn. That was the shape of the craft, was like an acorn, and it was see-through. Now, some of you remember back in the days with Wonder Woman, her craft was see-through. So they have some sort of craft that has this cloaking. You know, when I talk about some of the ships have this like gelatinous kind of quality where they have an invisibility quality, but you could see the actual beings inside the craft. You couldn't see them fully. They almost look like blobs a little bit, but the villagers denoted when they saw the crafts, sometimes they would see it. It was acorn shaped and it was see-through, and you could see two beings sitting down in the craft, and it looked like black kind of like blobs, or he said like a bunch. He said a term in Spanish that meant like a bunch, like sitting there like a lump. Okay. Why does that matter? Because I don't know if you remember, and I could be wrong, but as soon as they said that it looked like an acorn, you know who I thought about, y'all? Remember when the Nazis were working on technology and there was this bell that was found over in Philadelphia that traveled through supposedly time, and we talked about this bell craft that the Nazis had created? What if, when they said acorn, I thought about the bell? Now, maybe I'm wrong. Can you guys kind of, I don't know what your opinion is, but the first thing I thought is that the acorn, the first thing in my mind was like, that's like the Nazis. When the Nazis had done that time traveling bell that was found later in Philadelphia that traveled all the way from World War II, right? I'm just saying, like a bell and an acorn, you know, perceivably, remember, these are people living in a jungle. As soon as I thought about the way that the craft was, I was like, that sounds like the Nazis' bells. Then also, for those who realize, after World War II, you know, many of the Nazis went over into Central and South America. You do know that, right? And this is South America. And this is over in the jungle where many of these beings with their advanced technology definitely would have the ability to have created suits, hoverboards, and ways to be able to cloak themselves and ride. And I mean, you think about it, the Nazis, if they were creating all this technology and they had all this reverse technology, why wouldn't you think that they would have the ability to create suits that were navigating with, you know, self-propelling, feet, little discs? I mean, I'm just saying, it just sounds like, you know, when it smells like a duck and it looks like a duck, it's probably a duck. You know what I mean? So it sounds kind of like this sounds like Nazis. And also, you know, listen, y'all, what you perceive as Nazis, I really say are Zionists, okay? Because Nazis and Zionists are one and the same. Why is that my concept? Is because after World War II, And I use what happened in Israel as my beta, my confirmation, is that during World War II, and remember, I had a grandmother who was living. So a lot of this information, a lot of the ways that I perceive things is I get certain information from people who were at that time. My grandmother said it was like a setup over there in Europe, that the so-called, what they perceived to be as Jews, were literally the Nazis who were setting up the people there. So you got to think to yourself, what if there were this group of Nazis that were placating like they were Jews, like one and the same, and they were setting the people up, but really they were the actual Nazis? It happens all the time. So at the time in Europe, Eastern Europe, when the Jews were collected, it was a whole bunch of so-called other Jews who had set them up, just like what happened in Israel when the border was let down for 6 and 7 hours. Now, listen, Israel's a very protected place. I mean, they call it, what do they call it? The Iron Curtain. They have a big protective shield around them. Just kind of like that. Like, why for 6 and 7 hours would you allow a whole border to be open? It doesn't make sense. Like, especially living in amongst, like, listen, if you living in a sea of like enemies, you wouldn't ever leave your borders down unless you purposefully did it, right? Unless it was a setup that you wanted to be. It's the same thing in World War II. At the time, when you hear things, remember, unless you had family member that were around at the time, which a lot of people have already transitioned from that time, you don't hear many accounts, especially of other foreigners. Remember, my grandmother was French nationality. The fact of the matter is, she said they were set up by their own. Okay, so this whole concept of the Nazis, when in fact, why would you say that the Nazis existed, but when United Fakes had contracted all of these Nazis over here, that's where we get the eugenics system, where they were contracting United Fakes, and that's where you get all your fluoride in the water, all the geoengineered food that's meant to destroy your organs, then you get all this chemtrails in the sky. That's all comes from the Nazis, okay? But what if I told you that who is perceived in the Nazis is also a Zionist, and they were placating themselves as Jews? What if I told you that? What if they were pretending that they were Jews? And really in itself, remember, you don't really have to do anything, because remember in itself, the Ashkenazis are converts, okay? And we're not talking about the Sephardic Jews, because there's many different tiers of Jews, okay? Most people who aren't aware think that all Jews are one and the same. They think that only the rabbinical Jews that look Orthodoxy and Ashkenazi are the only Jews. You know, there are Sephardic Jews that come from North Africa, the southern part of Europe, and also from like Eastern Africa, like with the Ethiopians, Eritreans, and so on. I think most people who don't have an awareness think that all Jews are one thing. And that isn't true. There's many different, just like there's many different kind of Christians, many different kinds of people who are Muslim. I think the limited mindset only listens to the narrative that's coming on social media, so they only know what's being conveyed to them. Okay? What if I told you that the very Zionists, the very Jews and Nazis were one and the same? And who was contracted here? Because listen, y'all, I've been in South America. If you go in places like southern Brazil and over in Argentina, why would Jews and Nazis live in the same town? Why would they do business together? If you see how sensitive the Jews are in Israel, it doesn't make sense that those who had been under the tyranny of eugenics programs and also put in concentration camps would ever live in eyesight of so-called Nazis. Why would that happen? And why would the very things that are happening in Palestine and Israel with the skin harvesting, which is a fact, the company is called, let me state this. The company is called Kabir Forensic Institute. It's located near Tel Aviv. They harvest skin. So wait a second. And the very beings in Palestine and Israel are getting skins from beings that unfortunately transition, and they're taking the skins and harvesting it. Wait a second. The same thing that's kind of happening over in Peru. Could it be that the very beings that are doing the harvesting there are the same ones contracting the harvesters over in Peru? Do you smell it, y'all? Do you smell similarities? Okay? What would be the chances that we know that Yafi spelled it correctly. Their company is called Kabir, right? Wait, it's called Kabir? Abu Kabir. They are harvesting, they harvest skins, coronas, heart valves, bones, bodies of Israeli citizens, Palestinian citizens, foreign workers without permission. And this is something that was in the news. They talked about it in the 90s. I had to find the article because when I saw what was happening over in Peru, I had to say, wait a second. I know something that was happening over in the Middle East, because I was like, wait a second. Why would the very same things that are happening over in Peru be something that was detailed over in the Middle East, in Tel Aviv? Listen, I'll give you the company again. Call it CAP. It's not CAP. It's Abu Kabir. They're specialists. They harvest skins, coronas, heart valves, bones, bodies in Israel's Israeli soldiers, Palestinians, Israeli citizens, and foreign people. Okay. Whenever you see a similar kind of disposition, you got to always know it's usually the same handlers or the same contractors who are doing the same thing. And why do I say this? Because we're going through a so-called holy war, and you're starting to see very similar things show up globally. And all of a sudden, you're starting to see similar things happening over in Peru that have happened over in the Middle East. And how do I know this also? Because I'm going to give it to everyone. Over in Africa, where there are Arabs that are doing, there are Arab nations. Now, remember, when I say Arabs, there are different types of Arabs, different types of, what do you call them? Like, what are they called? Tribes? Different tribes? What are they called? Like, what are they called? Not tribes. What are they called? Like different, how do you say it? What is it called? Not tribes. What do they call them? The Arabs have different tribes. What is it called? There's a word for it. Oh God, what is it called? Sex? No, there's something it's called. Okay, I'll remember it. Maybe sex. It's different kinds. Okay, so we got to be careful because, like I said, me stating Arabs is very broad. It's like me saying black people. Like, which black people? Are the black people in the Americas, black people in the Caribbean, black people in Africa, black people in the Polynesian Islands? You know what I mean? I got to be very careful because there's different types of Arab nations. Okay, there's different sectors. Okay, so remember, I'm equal opportunist, y'all. Everybody's getting it today, okay? And I want to show you that organ harvesting and these face peelers are all connected to the Malakians, okay? I'm trying to build ethnic groups, right? I'm trying to build something upon you so you understand these so-called governmental grays are contracted by the Malakian empires, the Malakian ancient empires that are basically doing everything that you see, all these diabolical things. It's all one. Okay, it's one group. They're doing it in the Middle East. They're doing it over in the Americas. They're doing it in Africa. And also what's happening with the Arab sectors, I just saw a video and I will not share with you the details on this video. It is a factual video. I didn't know it was as bad as it is. It shows a sector of Arabs over in from the Middle East going into certain African neighbors, and they basically have a whip. You can see it on Alex Jones. He has some of the video. They have a whip and also shows them assassinating the Africans and eating them. They basically assassinate the Africans. They're torturing them. They're killing them. They're beheading them, killing the babies. And then also you see them eating the Africans as well. Okay? It's pretty bad. And that's why I say it's crazy that this is something that isn't being generated. You're seeing this whole thing with Palestine and Israel. It's way bigger than those two places, y'all. It's way bigger. And remember, there's victims in Israel, there's big victims in Palestine, there's victims in Haiti, there's victims in the Congo, there's victims in Eritrea, Ethiopia, in the Americas. It's happening all over. And I want you to realize that it's the same group that's doing it. They put themselves as different things, they name themselves different things, but they're all from the same tribe. Okay, it shows these videos of, and it's very heinous, y'all, of these innocent. I mean, when I say innocent, because remember, I perceive this to be a hologram. So remember, there isn't anything innocent in my mindset. Everything is happening because beings are projecting themselves in these bodies to experience these whatever heinous things for whatever reasons. It's all one government already. Yes, I agree. So why I share what happens in Peru and I talk about the Greys, that's why I say whoever came on my feed on my video the other day, you know, oh, Saudis murdered, oh yeah, the Yemens. That's right, the Saudis had murdered all the Yemens. And nobody talks about Yemen, how the awful genocide that's going on over there. How come, this is why I say, y'all, if you want to stand for anything, how do you only stand for things that are generated on social media? How come you don't go on behalf of the Yemens? Thank you, Yafi, who are being murdered and genocided. Same in the Congo, where they're creating they're drugging these young, beautiful, melanated little boys, kidnapping them from their villages, making them into soldiers and giving them drugs so they can go and murder their own family members. Like, how come you don't talk about that? How come you only want to go and protest when it's something that's being generated to create a certain narrative for an agenda to further subjugate you to some form of genocide or some form of like marginalization or some form of whatever they're doing? Okay, it's really quite devastating to hear these things. So listen, I love that I'm an equal opportunist, because you will only hear this kind of narrative coming from a woman of color, because I sit in a position where I haven't the same mindset or the same genetic caps as some other people would, based on proximity. Because I come from the family member, the bloodline I come from, because I speak multiple languages, because I've had the access to going into other places and have the amazing connection to a lot of people worldwide, I see from a different angle, and I'm able to see different multiple lines that are all interconnected. I'm letting you know, y'all, these governmental Greys are contracted by the Malakian Empire. The Malaks are the ones who are the ones at the Grove, you know, the what's that grove they go to? The what's that grove that the dark Kabbalists go over there? The what's that grove they go to? Something Grove. They do that whole ritualistic thing at the Grove. Oh gosh, you know, Bohemian Grove, the Bohemian Grove, right? They do these weird kind of things around the Malakian owl. They worship the owl. And you have to realize how this is all connected. Because remember, and I want to give you another homework assignment for those who don't use, who don't use who don't watch certain things. There's a movie called The Fourth Kind. This is a homework assignment, because many of you don't realize that those who are having contact with so-called Greys, the first thing that many of them were seeing were owls, because the way that they projected themselves, people were seeing owls. Okay, so if you watch The Fourth Kind, you're going to see a side-by-side imagery of the actual accounts of the people who are being subjected to a sort of like Greys, and also inevitably they were abducted. Okay, it's a great movie to see, because it wasn't at the time where they were trying to hide everything. You know, they always give you, remember, we're in an AI system. It's always going to give you bits of truth. If you watch that, you'll get an idea of what I'm talking about. The Malakians are what these beings, these Zionists, worship at the Grove. And this being is also a Grey. And if you look at the being, the accounts, or you listen to the accounts of people who have had contact with Greys, sometimes they'll tell you before they see the Grey, they see an owl, because that's how it projects itself. Why would it be an owl, y'all? And why would that be the same being that all of these so-called dark Kabbalists are worshiping at this Grove? Why is it that the Zionists, they're called Malakians? Why the Malakians, even when they were living in Eastern Europe? Remember the converts. They were living in Eastern Europe. If you listen to the biblical accounts, come here, Cookie. If you listen to the accounts of what was happening over in Europe at the time before World War II, the reason why there's a lot of different weird kind of things that happened at that time is because the villagers were saying that they were living in villages, and these beings who perceivably were like gypsies, who later were called rabbinical, they were considered to be Hasidic, right, Jews. They said that they would come into their villages, and then all the children would start missing. And it's interesting to me that when you hear about this, and then you hear about the harvesting in Central America, the same so-called Nazis that were relocated in Central America, that's when this started to happen. And then when you hear what happened in Israel with these same beings going over there and doing the same things over there, and you hear whenever they move certain places here in the States, there's a whole harvesting thing going on. You don't think it's the same beings cloaking themselves as Jews, pretending they're other things? Because I don't think they are really Jews. I think they're non-secular Jews cloaking themselves as Jews, pretending that they're that. And I think they go into other communities pretending they're of the other backgrounds as well. Okay, like priests, because you know, priests, weird kind of things happen in the Christian communities as well. So you don't think it's the same beings? Now you can listen, you can fact check me. Go and listen to the accounts in Eastern Europe of what was happening when these so-called gypsies that they were perceivably Jews were coming into there, and they were going in and children were missing. So they were being chased out of these places because people had noticed that when they showed up is when children were started missing. What are these converts? And why are they converts taking themselves and calling themselves Jews now? Why are they calling themselves Jewish people now? And didn't they call themselves Jesuits at one time? Didn't they call themselves the Knight of Templars at one time? Why are they changing their labels as convenient to cloak themselves in groups so that you don't notice what they're doing in those groups? You basically, that's what I'm saying. When you say and you blame the Jews, or you blame these Islam, or you blame the Africans, it's because these beings go in those groups, they placate themselves as those people and basically act and cloak themselves so that if it's not going to them get blamed, it's going to be the people that they're pretending to be get blamed. Do you understand? So why do I share this with you? Because all of the infighting would stop if everyone just took note that it isn't the Palestinians, it isn't the Jews, it isn't the Africans, it isn't the Americans, it is your Willy Wonka system ran by the Malachian agent Tears. Basically, they're the Knight of Templars, they are the Jesuits that are basically placating them as people that aren't really something. They're non-secular. They don't believe in God. They don't believe in anything healthy. They progenerate these things. And also, if you want to, who's that? If you want to basically say anything else, wherever they go, children go missing. Wherever they at, they do the most heinous things. They play themselves. They pretend that they're Arabs. They pretend that they're Jews. They pretend that they're African leaders, but pretend that they're some sort of Knights of Templars. They're everything. So instead of fighting each other and blaming each other, why don't you just take note that you are all victims of the system of the AI placated Malachians that are basically using you guys as a stooge? Okay? They're going to use all of you to play out their harvesting scheme. They're using skins, and I don't know what they're using the facial skins for. They could be using it to play as skinwalkers. They could be basically putting the skins on. Did you see the show whatchamacallit? What's the show? Oh gosh, what's that show? There's a show where it talks about they put on a skin. Oh my God, it's the one. Oh, it's perfectly. I forgot the name. It's the one Lovecraft. Remember in Lovecraft, she took the potion and she wanted to be a lunar. So basically her skin turned into a lunar. She was a brown woman. And then when she was done with the potion, she just crawled out of her skin. Remember the movie with Scarlett Johansson called Under the Skin, where basically she was luring men. This was taking place somewhere in either England, or was it in Ireland? Was it in Ireland? Where was it taking place? Was it in England or somewhere? England or I think it was England, if I'm not mistaken. It was taking place in England, and she was basically walking around and luring men to come to her holographic home. Remember, it looked like a house and basically was a spaceship cloaking itself in the middle of the neighborhood and taking them in the home, and men were following them, taking off their clothes, and they would go and walk in and get stuck in the ground, and it basically would starve them until it could take its skin off. You don't think it's by chance they tell you movies like that? And then all of a sudden you got people taking skins off the face of people? And then if you watch The Walking Dead, remember in The Walking Dead, they basically call the skinwalkers, where they were walking and cloaking themselves in the zombies, and they basically were wearing the faces of other zombies to make it look like they were one of them. I'm just saying, y'all, instead of blaming these other countries and making it seem like everyone, listen, I know people from Israel, they're not about that life. I know that you think that Israel is the demon. I know people from Palestine, they're really not terrible people. That's what I'm saying. Be careful by joining in these collective narratives to demonize people, because there's a group that cloaks itself in every religious order. They're over in the when they're not playing house over in Israel, playing themselves as certain things, or in Palestine or in Africa, they're playing house in the Vatican. They're over in the Vatican playing the Pope. That's what I'm saying, y'all. You just stop and think about it rationally. If you didn't think anything of it, just think about it. If you go to the Vatican, it's the same people that were placating themselves as Nazis. And why are there Nazi things over in the Vatican? Why are there certain symbols that the Nazis were using ritualistically that happen over in Rome? Okay, and also, no shade, but shade. Rome didn't really end, y'all, because if you look in South America as well, you're going to find a whole bunch of Italians over there. How come you have a whole bunch of Italians over in Brazil and Argentina and nobody talks about it? They make it seem like the Portuguese over there and the Spaniards over there. How come you don't know that Brazil has a large amount of Italians that live over there? Because remember, Rome, who lives in Rome? The Italians. Why is it that they're all over in South America? You don't understand? And there's also a show called Green Frontier, which speaks about the girl living in the jungle where she didn't eat or anything. It's a really good, I think it's called Green Frontier. It's really good. And it talks about there were Nazis living in the jungle trying to conquer the natives over there. What if I told you that the Jesuits, the Nazis, the Zionists, the Malachians are all one and the same? They're all one. And they basically move around cloaked because they're always telling you that there's someone else, and they don't practice. And let me say this also for those who are thinking that all of the so-called, even within the Jewish community with the Hasidai and the Orthodoxy, do know, like if you go into Brooklyn or in other places where there are many rabbis, you know they aren't supporting the war over there, right? They aren't supporting the narrative. So stop attacking people because they're wearing some spiritual robe that represents something to you, because you're under mind control. Those Jewish people living over in Brooklyn and other places where Hasidai live, they aren't all in agreement of what's going over in the West Bank and over in Israel and over in Gaza. Like, I think it's very limited when you think that because if that was the case, all of us in the United Fakes, do you think that we're agreeing with what the holographic president Biden is doing? Would you want to be held accountable for what your president is doing when we know very well we have nothing to do with what that clown is doing? First of all, we don't even claim him because we know he's a holographic president. So why would you blame a whole nation, Israel, Palestine, other places, for doing things collectively when we in fact don't even believe in what our government's doing? Just know that the Willy Wonkers are working independently, and they utilize their people to project and promote their agendas. So the fighting that's going on over there only presents a benefit to them. And these so-called contracted grays are wearing suits, and they're contracted by your Willy Wonka. And they are all contracted by these type of beings that worship the Moloch, the owl. And it's odd in itself because when you go to the extraterrestrial community, and I told you that people who were having contact with grays, those are the ones I don't trust, because they are all under the governmental system and they are being contracted by Willy Wonka. And anybody having contact with grays, I wouldn't trust them, because I already know that those grays are being sent by Willy Wonka and they are contracted under Willy Wonka. Like whenever you hear people in contact with grays, I stay clear of them because I already know who's contracting them, who's in contact with them. And that's why when I did my feed yesterday or the day before, there was a man who showed up on my feed after I talked about the Willy Wonka grays. Okay? So back to what's happening in Peru and what's happening over in many different places. Now we realize that The Peruvians are under the guide, especially in these remote areas. They are being infected, and they are being overran or harvested from a Willy Wonka group. And how I know also that the Willy Wonka over there is up for the shenanigans, that they basically know about these beings. How come they're being quiet? You have a whole group of people who are having the same account. They're in 2 different towns, 3 different towns, who are experiencing all of this this amazing tyranny of being harvested. Children are getting abducted. People are missing. How come their government is not reacting to it? You know why? Because they're all in on it. They're all in on it. That's why. Because remember, they get a piece of the apple pie. They're getting paid to allow and contract for their own people in their own country to be harvested. Just like in the United States with Roosevelt, who contracted for the melanates to be extracted and to be used for harvesting. Your Willy Wonka systems in Europe, United States, Australia, over in New Zealand, over in Africa, over in Asia, they're all under the same agenda-based control systems. They're all one. Because if they weren't, why are they all doing the same thing with the harvesting? And who the heck are they using the skins for? And that's why I told you, when you walking around here with the robotoids, they're probably wearing some of that geoengineered skin that they stole from some of these young people in these countries where they're harvesting organs and skin. Why are they using skin? Because remember, in Under the Skin, they never really quite told you why Scarlett Johansson, and remember Under the Skin, what color was she, y'all? What color was she, y'all? Because it's for the same reason why in Zimbabwe, they basically scrubbed the whole internet when the little children in Zimbabwe school had said they saw black, shiny beings with black hair. That's why you can't see it. How come you can't see those videos? How come the gentleman from Puerto Rico who said that he was in contact with beings that got abducted, what did he tell you? He said they were black, not Negro. As if to say it was, who told them not to say not Negro? Okay, remember him? You can look at that video when he says they were abducted by black beings, not Negro. Who would even say that? I thought all blacks were Negroes. Like, right? Like all of a sudden you have a distinguish, like in Puerto Rico, you know, to distinguish between black, not Negroes, and Negroes. Like, aren't they one and the same according to all of the status quo that's generated worldwide? Okay, these beings are something else. And these suits that they were wearing up in the jungle, I'm telling you right now, those mother freakers are all governmentally instituted. Okay? They're creating them. And this is some sort of technology that the Nazis had, y'all. And I'm telling you also is that in South America, where all of these scattered Nazis were, where they're living in close proximity of so-called Jews, like I said, if you did something grimy to my family and I knew it was you and yours, why would I live around you? Especially if World War II was a generation away, why would Jews be living in close proximity of Nazis who were the same progenitors of their genocide of their people? It doesn't make sense unless those people and those people are one and the same, and they're pretending and playing parts. Like, I'm gonna play a Jew today, and then I'm gonna play a Nazi today. Because the government, the Willy Wonka system, the United States contracted all of these so-called Nazis. That's why we have all this fluoride and everything like that. They contracted them. But then at the same point, if you have these Nazis, why would Jewish people want to come to the United States and even trust them if you're contracting the very people that tried to kill them? I'm sorry, y'all. Please put a like on my video if you're up for the shenanigans. I don't know. Could I be wrong? I just, and let me thank the man who got busted listening to my video and try to mess with my video when I talked about the governmental grays. You did a great job gaslighting me, because all you did was make me go further and research it. And then with Timothy's information, I just was able to put all the pieces of the puzzle together. Everyone should watch their entire family. And also the number one people that they are collecting skins and organs from, this is a fact, it's not conjecture. The number one people that are being kidnapped and organs being harvested to the highest degree are melanated people. People who have a lot of melanation. When you see this young lady, Talia, in this interview, you'll notice when she's talking to them in the jungle, she has my complexion skin. That is the skin that that's the number one skin that they're trying to take, is darker skin. Probably because maybe it's, I don't know, melanin has its own alchemical composition. And remember I talked about the bandwidth with melanin and you guys said it was cap? That further solidifies that it's mostly melanated people. There's a reason why they're taking it. Maybe just like in that movie, Green Frontier, to hijack certain things that those particular people would have access to. It's just, that's conjecture. I can't really say if that's fact or not. But you know, when you put everything together, yeah, it kind of sounds like it's the part. And I think, again, this is something that most people wouldn't know unless you come from communities where that's happening. So please refrain from saying that this isn't true. Black people are making things up, because some of you who say that are the same people who don't even know that during the slave age, they were taking little black babies and stealing them from slave women and throwing them to catch alligators. Did you know that? That's what I'm saying. Stay away from conversations that don't imply, that you don't know, have access to, based on proximity and DNA, and because of where you see. You can only see at a certain angle because you aren't in that community. But when you don't realize that there are things that you don't know because you're capped. Social engineering is wonderful, and it basically is allowing certain people to only have access to certain information. So the fact of the matter is, most of lunar people don't know the horrific things that were happening under colonization, with taking little black babies, throwing them. Could you imagine alligators eating the little baby and taking it to make alligator shoes? I actually have the microfiche sketches of it, y'all. Don't play with me. Remember, as a vetted historian, a woman of a certain age, educated and also well-traveled, who speaks different languages, who comes from a different background, I have access to things beyond most people who are limited or only living in a certain demographics. Okay? There are things that happen beyond, and it isn't saying little lunar children aren't being abducted. They are as well. And a lot of lunar children that are being abducted are also used for sex trafficking in a lot of Arab nations, okay? Because a blonde hair, blue-eyed child, especially a little girl, is being sold, sex trafficked in a lot of these Arab countries, okay? So that is also happening as well, okay? So this is happening across, everybody's getting it to a certain degree. I mean, the things that they use each person for is going to be different based on what they perceive the needs of that person, what they can give to them. But all of the things that are happening are pretty horrific and pretty tragic, okay? So it's very important for everyone in here to have a level of awareness and also have a level of compassion when you learn something new, you know, because for a long time, the voices of the indigenous has been blocked. And because of the forceful blacking out and muting of those voices, a lot of the things you don't know happen to the indigenous, okay? There's a lot of things you won't know because those communities don't really touch other communities, and they aren't using technology to the greatest degree. Even on the reservations now, I mean, the subjugation of people under forms of mind control. I mean, people are suffering from alcoholism. You know, speaking to my tribal people, it's very sad. It's very sad. And also, just as another additive, a lot of the indigenous carry B blood type, which makes them more susceptible to alcoholism and sensitivity to certain chemicals. And the side effect of being allergic to alcohol is also euphoria. So it causes people to have more of a susceptibility to alcoholism. So when you go into these reservations, just the fact that they call them that is disrespectful. You go on these reservations, you see the amount of, I mean, it's just really quite sad. It's really quite sad. But this is the end of the cycle. Everything is going to shift. I want you to be careful taking any sides in any positions. As you said, everybody got it today. Okay, everybody will get it. If you are taking a sided position, you are also taking a sided position to taking on the karmic residue that goes along with taking a side, because you only see from the angle that you can see. And it's nice to be able to, one of the things I love with this channel is that most channels are xenophobic. Most channels you'll only see if it's a lunar person talking, it's only lunars mostly on the channel. If you go to a brown person's channel, it's only brown people on the channel. If you go to an Asian person's channel, it's only Asian people on that channel. I'm so grateful for the international community that I touch, because I represent the international community. And because of that, you have all these different types of people and nationalities, different languages, different complexions on my channel. I'm so grateful that, we are the Rainbow Coalition in that way, that we share things that normally others wouldn't be able to have access to or know, because they're so xenophobic, or they're so, they stay in their little clique, in their little niche, that they wouldn't even talk to another lunar person. They wouldn't talk to a brown person. They wouldn't talk to an Asian person. They wouldn't even have this kind of information, because they're so stuck in that mind control, that limited box that Willy Wonka and his League of Doom purposefully do by telling you that the black man is a savage, the Arab is a crazy person, the white person's a Nazi. Like, they keep constantly telling us like how the other side is wrong. But if you go into a lot of these communities, you're gonna see somebody you like. When you go into like lunars, when you go into the brown community, if you like me and you listen to me, you're like, wow, Fleur Brun isn't really, she's not trying to drop it like it's hot. She's not twerking on Tuesdays. She's an alcoholic. She doesn't do drugs. She doesn't come from poor people. She's actually quite educated. Wow, I didn't know brown people actually were legitimately okay and came from a bloodline that was healthy. I change your perspective, because all of social media will tell you that I'm a whore. My people are low animals. We haven't the intellectual capability of obtaining any knowledge beyond our genetics. That, I only come from slaves. That's untrue. Everything that you've learned about brown people, I will break all of those spells, because I'm under zero. Didn't come from poor people. I hadn't come from slaves. I come from South America. I am an indigenous. I know my blood lineage. I know who I am. I'm educated. I love my children. I treat my family well. I'm not dropping it like it's hot, at least not today. I'm not twerking on Tuesdays. My body's not naked everywhere. You're not going to see men who slept with me all over the place. I was married and had children with one man. I'm breaking all your spells, because according to social media, I should be perceivably something else. Okay? So it's very important for you to realize that all of these projected stereotypes are meant to make you totally X people out, so that you aren't going to get the gems. Because once you know, like some of you have been on my Zoom and on my Wearby, when you have like, our friends are from Japan, Israel, Greece, Russia, South Africa, Ghana, Jamaica, Trinidad, Martinique, Panama, United States, all different places, New Orleans, New York, Atlanta. Then you've got people from Jamaica, Haiti, Dominican Republic. Then you have people who are coming from Poland, over in Norway. Then you have people from, who else do we have? We have China, Vietnamese, Cambodia. Like, once you have a group like that, do you know how many gems, and you know how many languages we speak? So I speak French, but also my family came by way of Brazil and over in South America and French Guyana, which is Cayenne. Isn't it amazing that Puerto Ricans, isn't it amazing that you can get a perspective from me that you wouldn't have access to? And it's the same way that we get and we break the code, because we're talking to our friends from Japan, or we're talking to a friend who's from Haiti, then we're talking to our friend from Israel. Like, a lot of the stuff you hear, I've gotten a lot of information from Yafi, who lives in Israel. She knows what's going on. So a lot of the false narratives that are being projected to us, we can actually verify, because she's on land. We've known people who are living in Vietnam. We know people who are living over in Bali. We know people who are living in Brazil and Colombia and Venezuela. So a lot of the things that all the prejudices and all the biases that your governmental systems are projecting, so you stay away from places. I get information from China, because we have a homegirl who's Chinese, who comes from Chinese people. So she works for a Chinese company, so she knows certain things. So it's very important that you realize that them separating us benefits them. When you separate people and you create taboos and jigaboos and all these kind of things, you lose sight of truth because they know that you don't touch that demographics because you won't ever have access to that information. Or you'll be so biased or victimized in your own mind that you won't even want to talk to them because you feel like they're your oppressors. Break the code, break your spells, y'all. Break it. This is all a hologram. This is all progenerated. This is AI generated. The top tier, the Malachians, are some sort of low tier beings that keep looping. They're forever loopers. So they're going to always create these types of issues and biases and progenerate these kind of things. You have the ability now with listening to this, you have the ability to break through the glass ceiling. You have the ability to see past the illusion or the progenerated low field biases that your governmental systems are doing because it benefits them. If you stop looking at your so-called enemy and look at the ones who are the ones ruling over you, we wouldn't even have to have this discussion because you would already know what's happening at this point. All of these so-called aliens, what's happening in Peru is literally a being. I personally think it's the Nazis that are doing this, that have this high technology. Just the fact that they had an Acorn chip, I think it's the Nazis that relocated there. They're utilizing this small community, these small tribal communities, using it to use the skins. Maybe they're using it to keep on their bodies or use it to shapeshift themselves so they look like the people that they're around. It's for whatever reason they're doing this. This is what I think. I think this is definitely the Nazis. They smell like the Nazis. They look like the Nazis. This sounds like them. They're over in South America. It makes sense. You know, when they said Rome fell, Rome didn't fall. It just relocated to South America. Okay, so a lot of these beings are living. If you think so, go over to South Brazil, Southern Brazil. Vontade. Go to Brazil. Yeah, you can verify what I say. Some of you don't travel enough. Go to Brazil and go to Argentina. Tell me what will shock you when you're going around, walking around. You're seeing tons of Italian products. You're seeing gelato. You're seeing all this amazing culture, but a lot of it's Italian. Why didn't they tell you that a huge amount of Italians moved over there? Why was Italian culture, all the mafia and stuff that were ruling over New York City, causing wreck in the 1960s and the 50s? How come they didn't talk about the mafia, where all that came from? You don't realize that you are being ran, and the illusions that they're presenting to you are basically it's like a smoke and mirrors kind of thing. They show you one thing, but you don't realize it's deeper. Rome didn't fall. South America was gentrified and they were relocated. The Nazis didn't get overcome. They were basically brought over. And remember, the Zionists and Nazis, to me, that's my opinion, they're one and the same. That's why you will see them living over in Argentina in the same neighborhoods. If those were the same people that genocided your family, you wouldn't live anywhere near them. Those were the people who set up the Jews over in and World War II. They acted like Jews. They pretended like they were Jews, but they weren't Jews. They were the synagogue of Satan. And they're the same bastards who were generating the same eugenics programs all over this holographic dome. Don't believe the hype. So anyway, y'all, I hope this was helpful, you know. Big up to everybody who, you know, tolerates my, you know, my binges of everything like that. Look deeper. Yeah, they created NASA. That's true. They created NASA. And look at NASA. NASA Nazi. Yeah. Oh, boy. Yeah. You got to be careful who you call Nazi, too. Because who they said are the Nazis are not the Nazis, y'all. It's all bait and switch. It's all, they're all imposters, exactly, energy. They're all imposters, right? Did you like my share today, my presentation? Thank you to the Dark Kabbalist who was on my page the other day. You really helped me to incentivize me to go further and to share these messages. Fight the power. Yes, eventually, we are the Rainbow Coalition. Remember the rainbow? Reading Rainbow. We are the Rainbow Coalition. I'm gonna go listen to Prince's I'm gonna go listen to Prince's album. Remember the rainbow thing he did last before he was out? And do you see all these celebrities transitioning out? Why are all these celebrated people transitioning? You know why? I told you, 3 years shelf life. They all had to take the Cucaracha kill shot in order to keep their positions. And boom, 3 years later, right on clock, right on time. I'm so sorry to hear that. Just say no to Willy Wonka. And then in the monkey balls, y'all. Monkey balls is on the rise, y'all. Let me talk to my young people. I gotta go because I don't want to take too much. Please put a like on the video if you like the shenanigans, if you want this video to stay up. Let me give a message to our young people, childbearing age. Young ladies, I know I talked to you before. Please refrain from having any intimacy with any of these beings, okay? Because, and also, let me sidebar, I forgot to tell you because this was part of the presentation, I forgot. The people in Peru that are being harassed and are being attacked by the skin peelers, they actually are non-inoculated. They're non-inoculated. Just saying. Maybe it means nothing, maybe it means something. Their blood has never been drawn. It's in his video, Timothy's video. You could check it out. Okay. I just put that sidebar in there. Okay. So let me just state this, y'all. It's very important for you to realize, our young ladies, monkey balls is on the loose. Maybe I shouldn't ruin the video. I'm not going to do it. I'll talk about it tonight. I'm not going to do it because because then I'll ruin the value because everybody's like, oh, she's perverted. Okay. Young ladies, just protect your yonis, okay? Because it doesn't matter that they didn't get the Cucaracha kill shot. They're sleeping with somebody who did. And monkey balls is on the loose. Remember nobody talked about the monkey balls kill shot. And there was a lot of people who got that shot. I'm just saying. All right, y'all. I'm going to go. I'm going to, enjoy the rest of my day. I hope this content was okay for you. We'll be on tonight if you want to join us on Zoom or wherever we be. We'll just, I don't know what we'll talk about tonight, but if you want to join a conversation with us tonight, in this holographic experience, this is a video game and it's getting really interesting and all of the things are coming together, and try to just stay, really just try to refrain from taking any sides. The only side you should have is your own, and live according and balance with just being a decent person, doing unto others is doing unto others. What is that, a Christian? Doing unto others as you would have them do unto you. Just be mindful of that. You know what I mean? And refrain from, because the Willy Wonka benefits when you take a side. So when you protest, when you say you're going to take this side, when you say brown people are monkeys, or when you say lunars are devils, when you say Asians are bioborgs, like refrain from taking a side. You could judge people if that's what you feel, is in alignment with you, but you gonna find out that once you leave this body in this hologram, you're gonna find that it's all cap. It's all a video game. So anyway, y'all, I'm gonna go. I'm thankful for everyone to join me. Please put a like on the video as you exit stage left or right. If you appreciate the content, put a like, so hopefully the video stays up. They're taking my content off piece by piece by piece. And all the videos that they took down, know that I uploaded all my videos privately, and all the videos they took down, I will re-upload them on the other channel. I'll re-upload them on my Patreon. I'll re-upload every video they took, because they just taken down random ones. So I'm thinking it's not that random. There's probably a reason why they're taking them down. So gratefully, I had the foresight to see that those videos were important. So I'll re-upload them on Patreon. You can have access to them whenever you want. It takes me time because I'm a little slow to movement. But I want everybody to wish you well in the holographic experience. Play the game. Don't let the game play you. Okay? Peace.